All right, with Nikki Haley now formally out of the presidential race, Donald Trump is the last man standing, and right now on the verge, maybe next week, maybe the week after at the latest, of securing the Republican nomination and the 1,215 delegates he'll need to make that all happen. Vivek Ramaswamy was also running for president, kind enough to join us right now. Vivek, good to have you back.
It's good to see you.
Let me get your sense of, Donald Trump says the party has never been more united. As you know, Nikki Haley disputed that and said her voters and supporters, so far predisposed to not support him, would not agree with that. What do you think?
Look, I actually look one step beyond the party, Neil. I see an opportunity to unite the country as a whole. One of the messages that Donald Trump has delivered in recent weeks that I really like is that success will be our vengeance, that success itself is unifying. And if you travel across this country, from rural communities to the inner cities to suburban communities, black to white, and even Democrat or Republican, most Americans agree that we need a secure southern border. Most Americans agree that we don't want prices to continually rise while wages have remained flat. And I think that those are unifying issues, the very issues that Donald Trump is running on, that not only unites a Republican Party. Are there some fissures in the Republican Party on foreign policy and other issues? Sure. But now, moving to a general election, the deeper question is, how do we unite all Americans around the basic values and the basic issues that 80% of this country agrees on? And I think there's an opportunity to win in a landslide like what Reagan delivered in 1980 and 1984. That's what I believe Donald Trump can deliver if we get this right between now and November.
Do you get a sense that Donald Trump has the DNA to do that? In other words, to be a unifier, to be magnanimous, to stop the name calling and that kind of stuff, because that is what holds a good many Americans back. They do like what he did in office, or a good many of them, but when it comes to pulling the lever and realizing that taunting and some of his less, warm and fuzzy parts, that's where they draw the line. What about you?
Well, look, I think there's two things I'd say in response to that, Neil. First, most Americans know judge a man not by his words, but by his actions. And for the better in Donald Trump's case, when you look at that first term, he kept us out of foreign wars and he grew the economy. Two things that Americans really wish for now, with an economy where they've struggled and on the brink of potentially major conflicts around the world. Look at a man who's actually done the job. And for the first time in American history, we have, and I say this as a scientist, as somebody at least who was in the biotech world, a controlled experiment, okay? You have 4 years of Biden and you have 4 years of Trump. Compare the two when it comes to international stability, economic growth, and border security. People will be able to make their choice based on results and action. But to your point about words and even about communication, I thought the way that Trump actually handled that press conference, that announcement after the Supreme Court decision, was actually elegant and, dare I say, inspiring for the country, casting that decision as a decision about national unity. And that's actually what it was. The Supreme Court basically said, are we one nation? If we are, we have to be one nation that elects one president on all of the ballots. All the candidates have to be listed, or else we're not a country, we're a patchwork of states. And I think Donald Trump came off of that not with a message of grievance, but with a message going to the heart of what that ruling on Monday was all about. It was about national unity. So, yes, most importantly, in the context of action and track record, and you have that controlled experiment of 4 years of Trump versus 4 years of Biden, that's what's most important. But even in these recent weeks, talking about the importance of free speech and national unity, I do think that's been the correct step in a right direction that could deliver that unifying landslide, Neil. And I'm going to do everything in my part to make that happen as well. And I'm optimistic for what can happen.
When you say everything on your part, people realize you're a very successful businessman, a biotech entrepreneur, and you've made hundreds of millions of dollars. We're told that Donald Trump has asked Elon Musk for some support. I don't know if that's true or not. Elon Musk made it clear that he's not giving to either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I'm just wondering, if he were to go to you and say, all right, can you loan my campaign some money, what would you say?
So, look, Donald Trump is not in need of anybody else's help or anything else. He's in the pole position to do this well. Every one of us has to look ourselves in the mirror and ask how we play our part.
Every campaign
and in my
money.
case, and look, I think, and the beauty of this is you have grassroots supporters. That's actually been the character of the America First movement. It isn't a movement of just big check writers, as it is for much of the Democratic Party and the establishment wing of the Republican Party. Say no to the politics of yesterday. Say no to the puppetry. The beauty of that America First movement, including what propelled Donald Trump and the America First movement forward, was a bottom-up uprising. I was actually honored, even in my campaign, to see, Neil. I would travel this country, ask people, if you ask for $10 to farmers in Iowa, they might give you $100. If you ask people for $1 to get you on the debate stage, they'll give you 10 if they believe in your message. And that's what this country is really about. It's about we the people selecting our leaders, not a small group of oligarchs or corporatocratic autocrats deciding who runs the country. And in my case, I've been about as vocal of a supporter of our America First principles as I could be over the campaign over the last year, and I don't plan to stop this year until we actually secure victory.
So you would think about the money thing, but you're not doing it now.
I'm going to be a vocal supporter, Neil. And, you know, each of us has a lot of businessmen on the sidelines. I'm focused on the front lines, and some of us have chosen to get in the arena, and that's where I'm playing.
Got it. Vivek, always good seeing you. Vivek Ramaswamy.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.